Or more ambulance coming right now? That's what I was thinking. More ambulance coming. All right. 3, 2, 1. What's up, guys? Faruqi Bros here. Today, we're reviewing Zack Snyder's Justice League. So this will be a non-spoiler review, so you guys don't have to worry about any kind of big reveals, but we're going to be talking about what we thought about the movie, what we thought about the tone, the best performances that stuck out to us, and what the future could hold for this franchise. So let's get right into it. I'm going to start with myself on this one. And for those of you guys who want to read a written version of my review, that's also going to be available on comicbookdebate.com. So for me, I mean, let's call it what it is. You know, for the four of us, we've been covering the Snyder Cut movement. We've been covering kind of the entire journey that this film has been on, from the time where people thought it didn't exist to the time where it's finally out now, right? Or it's coming out in a couple of days. So obviously, when we're watching it, part of that emotion is carried into the film. But if I look at the film itself and for just what it is, I have to be completely honest, boys. This for me was DC's Lord of the Rings. Like, this is DC's rendition of what a Lord of the Rings movie could be like in their universe. And I say that with full earnest because and it starts with first the direction, but also the score. There's a feel where everything feels very mythological from beginning to end, and there's a scope to it which is grander than most movies in general, but very few comic book movies are as grand as this one, as the scale of this movie, where they're going to be talking about, you know, it's more than just Earth, you know. So in some ways, it's like Avengers Endgame for the Marvel fans who are listening to this, where it's like you're going to be getting all your favorite DC characters in the most grandest story possible in this universe. And it's great to see that with Zack Snyder's Justice League, fans are getting treated to that. So you're going to be getting Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, Flash, and Cyborg in this huge story that has Darkseid and Lex Luthor and Deathstroke and Steppenwolf. There's characters from across the DC universe that normally would not be in the same movie. And it even took 10, 15 years of setup, they wouldn't be in the same movie, but we're getting that in this. And in that sense, it's very much, it feels like a love letter to DC fans, right? It's something that feels like, for those who are diehard fans, you're going to love this movie. And then those who are general audiences, you're going to find a lot to like about this movie. So that was some of my first thoughts, my initial thoughts when coming into Zack Snyder's Justice League. And I'm going to open the table to my bros to see what you guys think about it as well, before we talk about the specific stuff like tone and performances that stuck out to us. But like, Zian, I'll start with you. Like, just raw reaction when you watched this film. How did you feel about it?
Yeah, I think you basically hit on all the major points. It does feel just so much grander and more majestic in its nature compared to the usual types of superhero films you see, especially coming from Disney or the MCU, and even some of the DCU films that we had recently, such as Wonder Woman 1984 and Shazam and things of that nature. So just seeing it revert back to this grand, majestic style that Snyder is known for doing in his films, but with these DC characters, it's just so amazing to see. And that really was like the first raw reaction. Like you said, from the start of the movie, you can feel tonally is just something different. The scope of it is so much wider, and it's presented in such a not, I wouldn't say deep, I'd say deeper, yeah, but like more of a grand way. And I feel like that respect to the characters and respect to the source material is what helps it stand out and makes it such a different film from what we saw in 2017, because though it is the same general story, though it is the same through line in the film, it feels completely different because the way it's presented, because of the changes that they made in 2017 that are not present here. It's a completely different movie, and it was beautifully done. DC fans, like I said, will absolutely love it. There's everything in here, so what is there not to love from a DC fan perspective? And I feel like general audience will also appreciate and love it for what it is, and hopefully take a lot out of it from the movie as well.
And then Umar, you know, Zian mentions things like, you know, the DC perspective and the perspective of the fans and how the general audiences will see this movie. And this question's for you after you can give me your initial thoughts. But like, we always talked about how like BVS, you know, fans were divided about it. But for me, when I was watching this movie, and you might agree that, you know, it feels like the general audience might get behind this thing, like in a way they didn't with the movies prior, like the movies prior of Snyder's universe. So first, you know, tell me what your raw reaction was to the film, and then second answer, do you think that the general audiences will actually bite on this one?
Yeah, I think that you both kind of hit it kind of perfectly. It is a Lord of the Rings style film for the DC universe. And just for DC fans, I mean, you're getting everything you love, like everything that people grew up with, especially our age, our generation, the stuff that you guys grew up with, like that's what you're gonna get in this and more. So combined with the style that Zack Snyder already has, which we've seen in Batman v Superman and Man of Steel, and even with Watchmen, I believe this film is kind of the middle of all those three that I just named. It's like the kind of very balanced, very middle of all those three, in a lot of respects. And I think that is going to make the general audience kind of open to kind of getting behind this thing. And I also think that even for critics, I think that that's also a lot of the things that kind of people didn't like or whatever the case may be. You find that Zack Snyder, of course, didn't make it for the critics. He doesn't really care, which is why he's so good at what he does. But at the same time, you do see how this story is very, very different in terms of its tone. But it was just amazing as a fan. My raw reactions were much like you guys. I became a child when the movie came on. Honestly, it was just fun to kind of jump back into the Batman v Superman, Man of Steel universe, which is something that the fans have been asking for and pretty much dying for at this point. So it's just felt good to just go back into that and just see where the characters are going to go and the arcs that kind of were left off, and now the new arcs that came. I know we're going to get to, we thought who was pretty much the crown jewel of the entire movie in terms of performance. But all in all, man, as a fan and as just a kid that grew up with all this stuff, it's an amazing amazing feat, man, for not just Zach but everybody that was involved.
Yeah, and you make the point that fans waiting because I really think about that. I was thinking about how since BVS, it's been we're into the fifth year, right? We're getting 5 years now between the gap between BVS and Justice League, Zack Snyder Justice League, and then the gap between Man of Steel and BVS was 3 years, right? And we're not used to that anymore with the speed at which superhero movies come out. Like, you're gonna watch Civil War, and then 2 years later, Endgame's right there. Like, you're getting Infinity War in the middle. Like, there's no gaps in the speed of you getting these movies. And this reminds me almost like the old school days, because think about the gap between Batman Begins and Dark Knight, 4 years. The gap between Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises, another 4 years. So it's like back then, that's how you used to do it. It takes a long time for these movies to come out. And when they do come out, there's a different kind of satisfaction. Whereas right now, and I don't want to say it's like assembly line movies, but right now you get them so fast. Like, you're getting 3-4 superhero movies a year from the same studio. Then you get complacent. You're going to get this one flavor every single time. Whereas back in the day, like even with the Raimi Spider-Man movies, like it was 2002, 2004, 2007, you were taking your years gaps between getting the movies, which is an interesting thing I thought about, which how fans will consume this movie, knowing how long it's been since the last one. But back to the subject at hand, which is how we thought about the movie, because it's interesting because me, Zion, and Umar, we usually look at we have an affinity towards Zach's movies in a way where I would say 90% of his decisions we're going to be agreeing with creatively. So it feels very much natural for us to like probably whatever the director will put out, because we just like that vision, right? For Samir, you're kind of like more in the middle. You're going to pick and choose. Like, there's some stuff that you love a lot. There's some stuff that you're not going to like as much. So when it comes to, like, for example, you said Man of Steel is your favorite movie of Zach. So when it comes to Justice League, what did you think about it? Like, knowing that we've been covering it for years, but now finally seeing it.
I did see a lot of issues when it came to color grading and CGI, but I don't think these issues necessarily have to do with the story. So if those changes were being made in 2017, I don't think the same issues would apply here. So overall, I think it was a great move.
Yeah, and so we move from that to tone, right? Because I think this is the big difference of 2017's movie, which I don't think we're going to spend too much time on comparing movie to movie. I think that's been done to death from the trailers and everything like that. So let's stick to this movie, but tone is important, and Umar touched on this, so I'll give Zion this question. Do you think that, number one, like, how did the tone feel to you of this movie compared to BVS? Because in my opinion, BVS was darker than this movie, and this movie was dark in its own ways, but I think BVS was darker. I think Man of Steel was lighter than this to some degree. Obviously, this movie's still rated R, but how did the tone feel to you of this movie? I mean, did you get what it was selling, basically?
Yeah, I mean, the tone was similar to BVS. I feel like they had a good balance of levity, because I wouldn't say that there was a single joke. It wasn't like BVS where it was pretty much serious throughout the film. There was a lot of levity, a lot of points of lightness in the film, mostly through certain characters, which are obvious. But I feel they created a good balance where it never got too dark in any one moment, but when it did, it was very, very serious. And I felt like just that helps you go along through the movie without feeling too brought down by it, and it will be like too jokey where it's like, oh, it's not even taking itself seriously, which you want a film to take itself seriously a little bit at least. I felt like aside from that, they paced the tone well, as well, because you don't want it to be overloaded where all the levity is just in one scene where it's just comedy, 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 and then you never see it again. I felt like throughout all the darker moments, they sprinkle a little levity in between so you wouldn't feel too over encumbered by anything or any one scene. But in terms of BVS, I felt like when this movie got darker, it got darker than what BVS had, especially in terms of violence. Of course, it's rated R, and in certain scenes, it really showed graphically, like, all right, violent things are happening to certain characters. So I feel like in that aspect, it got darker than BVS, but then because of the levity, it wasn't as dark as a whole.
I think your point actually more facilitates how the general audience will feel like, because like we know the general audiences for BVS, they felt turned off by the darkness. But I think here, I mean, for us, I don't think it matters that much, but for the general audience, they seem to care a lot so about the tone. So I think in this thing, I think once again, I think this matches what Umar was saying, that not only do people who grew up with like the animated series, for example, will feel a lot of the same story beats, but tonally it balances very well. Like for me, this might be one of the best balanced Zack Snyder films in terms of tone, where you're gonna have this, like, again, for 4 hours, you have to keep the audience interested. You cannot deliver a 4-hour movie just like that, because if it would, then everyone would be putting out huge long movies. But so if you're doing it, you got to be very careful and make sure it's paced in a way that people are attentive. And for me, the 4 hours went by really quick. Like I just, maybe because I again went to kid mode, I was like, okay, I'm gonna enjoy this thing as a fan, and as a fan, I completely did, right? So there's always this kind of balance between the critic mind and the fan mind, because the fan mind in me is going to say this movie's goated, and then the critic mind in me is like, okay, let me look at it, let me analyze it. But then knowing Zach's attention to detail, and then the potential of everyone else like Fabian Wagner and etc., you know that you're going to be giving a very good product quality wise. So Umar, then for you, I would ask the same thing. Like, did the movie 4 hours, like that length, did that feel adequate to you? Did you feel like, did it go too long, or did you feel like, hey, I actually didn't want to end, like it was just really good the whole time? So where do you stand on that spectrum?
I think that because we knew a lot of what was going on, it was there were points in the film where I felt like, oh, okay, this is cool, seeing a lot of this part, seeing a lot of that part, but the way it was used kept me, right? So the way things were kind of used, even the stuff that we already knew about, I think that honestly, the 4 hours, I mean, you go into these big spectacles, sometimes not wanting them to end. And the cool thing with this one was like, even after 3 hours, you're not really, you're kind of so into it at that point that you're like, I don't mind another hour, an hour and a half for it to keep going on. And the cool thing with this one as a fan is that you're actually able to kind of have that in this one, where you do get a lot of, like, it just keeps going. So but it was paced so well that I actually do feel that just to harp on the point that you just made, is that I do feel that this is the most balanced, one of the it's very, very balanced, all different aspects. And I feel that I think probably in the days that come, we'll probably talk about this more on our personal thing and eventually get to it in spoiler talk. But I do think that this one is gonna go really high up all time, partly because it feels like perfect balance between all the different worlds. So you have the Nolan world that's very real, grounded. You have you got Zack Snyder go super dark for BDS, and then you have the lighthearted stuff for the MCU. You have the violence of the X-Men series. You have like all these different universes and even the deep depth of Watchmen. And it feels like Justice League is a very much took the best of all the other universes and just put it into this with the DC lore. And that I gotta give it up.
And that's why I compared it to Lord of the Rings, because Lord of the Rings, we're talking about a similar length movie, 4 hours long, 4+ hours if the extended version. And the same thing with Peter Jackson's directing. He's not going to give you too much dark or too much light at any given moment, but you're going to have characters who will provide the comic relief, like your Gimlis and whatnot. But then you have guys like Aragorn who are going to be straightforward. They're going to be serious the whole time, right? So having those characters balance off each other in this film, it does very similarly, where you can from the whole league, you're going to have people who are very much straight lined like Batman, and you can have people like the Flash who are going to be more comedic, and that balances very well between the characters, and it works. It provides like. And I don't mean to take as a shot at the Avengers, because the Avengers have a great dynamic as well, specifically Cap and Tony. But there's times where like everyone can't be Iron Man, you know, where Doctor Strange has the same personality as Iron Man, and then Captain Marvel is like Iron Man, and everyone just like is the same like kind of brash personality who's going to make jokes. And again, you can't have the same character, right? So I think with Justice League, no two characters feel alike, and they all feel like their motivations are completely separate. And I'm gonna have one more question about length and about kind of pacing, which Samir, that'll be for you.
Let me just one last point, because you know, for the people who are wondering, think that, oh no, are they messing up scenes? Where it's like you see that a lot in the MCU, unfortunately, more than not, where even during a very serious moment, they'll throw in a quip or some kind of thing just to break you out and make it more lighter. You don't have to worry about that. That won't happen, because when it does get serious and something serious is being discussed, there won't be a random quip or something thrown in just to mess up the scene, just to make it lighter. All the levity that's in the movie is very naturally layered throughout in scenes where they could fit naturally in a regular conversation or a real conversation. It doesn't feel out of place, so there's no worry there.
And I mean, obviously, when you let Academy Award-winning screenwriter Chris Terrio do the script and actually trust him to do what he used to do, he's going to show up with a script like Justice League, right? Where you see things like the theatrical cut, or even Rise of Skywalker to some degree, where you see like his script was messed with a bit, then you get a product that's not as sharp. But this film, and we talked about it from even the trailer breakdowns, the dialogue is very sharp, and we can get that in our spoiler talk about what exact dialogues we're talking about. But Samir, to get back at the question, this film was obviously had parts, and so it's like, I'm not gonna say how many parts, even though it is out there, but so without spoilers, do you feel like having part 1, part 2, part 3 actually helped with the pacing of the film? Or do you think that it actually would have been better if it was just going straight? Personally, I thought the parts actually helped. Like it helped you kind of like resync up. So it's like if a film is going, then you get, oh, part 3 started. And you kind of like, it's almost like you reset in your mind. It's like, okay, part 3 starting, you take it as it is, right? Almost like we know there was a rumors about, you know, the chapter stuff, which was originally pitched by Zack, but now as a film, Samir, do you think that the aspect of having parts in the film actually helped with the pacing?
I do think it helped, because I think it felt a little slow just because of the sheer length of the film, but because it's in parts and it's on a streaming service, you don't necessarily have to watch the whole thing in one sitting, because in parts you can just divide up the parts and then watch it.
Yeah, I think that's what people are going to do. I think that's one of the reasons why they put it in there, because for general audiences, for casual fans, maybe you're not going to sit 4 hours and watch it, but you watch half of it up to part 3, and then you watch the rest later, right? So, and then we watched on one sitting, so we can attest to that version as well, because I think one sitting, for me at least, was probably the best way to see it. But of course, you can't speak. I think Omar, you agree with that also. I think one sitting is the way to go for this movie, especially just to get what I call the crescendo, which means like you're building up to something. Whereas if you stop at part 3 and you start again, you could have to like completely restart that drive up to the mountain, right? And then because when they reach the mountaintop, that's when it really hits you.
That's why I do feel that, and I think this is hand in hand with Samir's point as well, is that that reset helps, and of course streaming service does allow you to kind of break it up. But I do think that even when we watched it, watching it just one shot, you could tell that it's layered to be a movie. Like it's layered to be a long, like Lord of the Rings style, like long journey-esque type movie. So I do think that even just watching it in one shot, personally, I think that is the way to watch it. I think that's the default way to watch it. Because if you're watching one part and then the next part, something wild happens, and it's connected to a previous part, then if you're breaking it up into parts, I feel that you could have kind of like this, you can have kind of like fatigue, like, okay, whatever. Like it might not have the same kind of jump.
Right. And then that leads us to the next part, which is towards the latter end of this review, which is the performances, right? Let's talk about the performances, and in many ways, performances that were waiting in the cellar for 4 years, right? Because a lot of these actors, they did every scene, right? Very few came back for the additional sequences. So a lot of them, this is the first time we're seeing like the full performance, and I'm not gonna beat around the bush because I'm talking about Ray Fisher right now, and his specific performance as Victor Stone Cyborg to me was the thing that carried the movie. And you know, we said it time and again. Zach says a million times that Ray Fisher's the heart, Cyborg's the heart of the movie, and you hear it, and it eventually just becomes kind of like, okay, he's heart of the movie. But to see it and to see it actually a theory come to practice, actually see it on screen, and you're seeing, then you're like, yeah. At the end of the movie, I'm like, Cyborg's the heart of the movie. He's the main character of the movie. The whole movie is driven by Cyborg's arc, right? And everything he goes through is what drives the movie from beginning to end. So it's his movie in many ways, which is again very risky when you think about you're doing a Justice League movie, and you can make Superman the main character, you can make Batman the main character, you can make Wonder Woman the main character, but nah, Zach decided he's gonna make Ray Fisher the main character, and Cyborg the main character rather, and then he picked Ray Fisher, an actor who's literally, this is his first feature film, to lead the whole thing himself. So that's a lot of trust. And I gotta say, Umar, I mean, you can take this next one as one ambulance passes, but yeah, want to give it a second. Yeah. So Umar, Ray Fisher's performance, man, tell me, how did that kind of stick out to you?
In my opinion, it's the crown jewel of the entire movie, from start to finish. Just the range. Obviously, his character's arc, and we can't really go into spoilers, but his character goes through a lot of challenges. And I do think that his character in particular, and you guys know me enough to know that, for me, I really do care about how these characters can make an impact in the real world. Like how I try to look at these films and try to see like, okay, whose performance is going to have like a huge impact on a lot of people. I do feel that Cyborg's arc in this character, and especially the way Ray Fisher played this role, like it's going to have a tremendous impact on real people. I think people are going to watch it and see a lot of themselves and be inspired by it. So not just the story aspect, but also the way Ray Fisher, like some of these scenes are freaking crazy, man. Like, I mean, the trailer has some of them, and we will get to it in our spoiler talk. But one thing I did want to comment on is just the sheer range, like the range that Ray Fisher showed from like one part of the film to like 10 minutes later to 5 minutes later. It was amazing to see for him, and I do feel that this movie shows that there should be an immense amount of confidence in Ray Fisher. If Ray Fisher can carry a Justice League movie, okay, for 4 hours, then he can easily carry a solo film where he can go through kind of, you know, a storyline of his own. It would be freaking amazing to see that.
Or a solo series, either one, yeah.
Either one, man.
So Samir, man,
so yeah,
go ahead. Samir, I was thinking same question for you. Who do you think had the best performance in the film? And do you agree with me and Umar now that we've said Ray Fisher?
Yeah, I think it was either Ray Fisher or Ezra Miller. Ezra Miller was really like the best part of the film. Yes. I don't think Ray Fisher was necessarily the main character though. I think it was more Ben Affleck's Batman was the main character, but I think Ray Fisher really brought some heart to the role.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, yeah, Batman is right there. Like as for me, it read more emotionally like he was the second main character. I think emotionally, Ray Fisher is the main character, but Batman is your protagonist. He's like, he's the person who's gonna move the plot forward, you know, and he's the one who's gonna be, you know, putting the team together. But now that we're talking about Batman, so Zion, I mean, you've said a lot as another ambulance passes New York City, but Zion, we've spoken a lot about, you know, Batman in theatrical cut. And again, ad nauseum, we've discussed how that wasn't Batman. And that's almost a disrespect to the character. But for you, as the resident Batman fan, now that you saw this movie, how did you feel about, number one, getting Ben Affleck back again as a full Batman for a full movie, but also tonally in his arc from where he was in BVS to where Batman is now? Speak on that.
Yeah, I mean, it really is, and I cannot stress this enough, it is day and night from 2017 Justice League. Like that movie, it was like, I don't even consider that Batman. And so seeing him finally, like he is a true leader in this film, and you really feel off him. You feel his guidance. He's like a general for this team, and Ben Affleck really killed it in his performance as well. Though I agree that Ray Fisher's performance is probably my favorite in the film, only because he is the emotional core of this film. And though, like Umar said, Samir said that, yeah, Batman is like a integral part. He is the leader. It's Cyborg who's like the central part that helps things move along, which makes him like the core of the film, essentially the heart, as Zack Snyder put it. But as far as Batman, when you see this, it's like, it's unfortunate because he's so amazing in the role, and Batman was like, I almost like this Batman better than BVS, because you knew that BVS was in a dark point as far as the story is concerned, and this is him returning back to, this is the Batman we know, this is the Batman from the comics, this is the Batman who's like the leader, the protagonist, who is basically unrelenting force, but he has also this goodness in him, and he's not torn down by darkness. And I feel like that perfect balance was shown in this film, and Ben Affleck did a great job of showing how his Batman had evolved and grown since BVS, and from those events, now he's a changed person. Now he sees the error of his ways, and now he's working to try to fix it. And I felt like the writing, everything was just perfect on this character, and it was just amazing to see.
I think frame of mind. I think that's very interesting when each character's frame of mind in this movie, and Batman's frame of mind. We'll get into a spoiler talk, but he looks through the world very differently in this movie than he does in the last movie, and we'll talk about it more at length in a spoiler talk. But I think Affleck carried it very well, and I could see the audience going crazy for more Ben Affleck. We already know after BVS, the two things people loved more than anything else was Ben Affleck's Batman and Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman. But Ben Affleck's Batman was always like, people, even who didn't like the movie, they're like, oh, I don't know about BVS. Oh, but Batman, Ben Affleck was a good Batman. Like, I remember that conversation always happening in 2016. And I think when they see him here, it's going to be a lot more the same. Like, this is a badass Batman. But Umar, switching from Batman, let's talk about Wonder Woman, because I mean, Zack has a way that he directs Wonder Woman and directs Gal. Obviously, he casted her, so they have a special relationship as a director and actress. But when you saw Wonder Woman in this movie, again, without spoilers, like, how did you feel like seeing this character back? Because we just saw her 3 months ago, right, in the sequel movie. But without talking about the sequel movie too much, how did it feel seeing her in the warrior fashion that she was displayed in this movie?
Oh, she's crazy. That's it. That's the way to put it. I think she's a warrior. Like, she doesn't care. And I think when she says in Batman v Superman, I've killed things from other worlds before, and when she's smiling when she's fighting Doomsday, that is the Wonder Woman you're getting here as well. And just, yeah, that's all one can say. Wonder Woman, she has her own arc, obviously, and what she's going through, and kind of like and I love that about this film, where like each character really did have their own worlds, like, kind of thing. They were carrying their own baggage when it came to, like, even when being with the League and doing what the League does. And I think that the actress, she did a good job of showing that.
Yeah. And then for Samir, like, we're talking about Aquaman now, and what do you think about the Aquaman character? Because I feel like Aquaman is in some ways the most similar than he was in theatrical cut, only because I feel like maybe they didn't reshoot too much of his scenes. But the stuff that was like pretty the worst part of the theatrical cut was removed. But what do you think about Aquaman in this movie in particular? Because there were some differences of this world that they were building. For example, Mera, her accent was she has a British accent in this movie compared to the American accent she had in James Wan's version. So I'm gonna give you a twofold question. Number one, how'd you feel about Aquaman in this movie? But number two, how'd you feel about the Atlantis, or the way they were building Atlantis in this movie?
I'm gonna be honest. I think I like James Wan. Right, that's his name.
Yeah.
I liked his interpretation of the character in Atlantis a little more than this one, just because there wasn't really that much of his character. He wasn't really that prominent of a character in this film overall. That's pretty much it, actually.
I thought he was probably the least important character, and that's not a knock on Jason, because he's great. But I think he was, like, from the League, if you had to, like, rank who had the most important role to the least, he had some great moments, but it did feel like it was a lot of setup for a solo movie, almost like you were setting things up, setting the seeds of eventually what we know to be 2018's Aquaman, where he finally meets his mother, and that's a great part of that thing, and the relationship with his father. That's all kind of wrapped in this movie. But
I think he's the more broken type. I think that his arc, he's like kind of where Batman kind of was on a smaller scale, like where Batman was in Batman v Superman. He was kind of there, I think, in this one. So and it showed in, like, the kind of performance that he gave as well. But I do think the aspect of him feeling the way he felt, the way Aquaman feels in this movie is also it's a huge part of the storyline aspect, which we will get into.
Yeah.
I think there's one thing that there is a big part of the
Oh.
story that we're kind of missing right now, but we can't really say it. So
Yeah, and again, we're walking around a little eggshells right now in a way because we're trying to make sure that we're not gonna touch on the big story point because obviously this review's gonna drop before the film is out. So, and I'll take the last character. I'll take Superman myself, and I think Superman does feel like Superman. I can just say that he's Superman. Like when he shows up, you're gonna know who he is. You're gonna know what he's all about, and his powers are on full display. And you get a full sense of Superman's growth through the 3 movies because Superman's obviously been there the longest since Man of Steel. So you have a connection to Superman if you're like a DCU fan that you're not gonna have with everybody else because he's been there for so long. So you're seeing a journey from beginning to end. I was maybe surprised that he wasn't in the movie as much as I thought he would be, but I think the scenes he was used in were absolutely great. And obviously the way I always felt that Zack's interpretation of Superman in particular is one of the best versions of the character. And that always, like when people say, oh, which of Zack's characters you like the most? And you guys talk about like Zack's Batman or Zack's Superman. I think those are the 2 that people are going to bring with the most. But Zack's Superman in particular, only because we spent so much time with him, has always resonated with me. So seeing him back, obviously, in a proper way, wearing the black suit, which looks absolutely clean, especially when you know that that's not the actual suit they were wearing. So I think the VFX team did an absolutely great job of putting that whole suit together because it looked great when he pulled up. It looked great, and I think that was. I can't talk about spoilers, but there's some moments of Superman that are. Come on, if you're a fanboy, you're gonna be crazy about it. But
I gotta put you on the spot, Troy. I gotta ask you. I gotta put you on the spot. Is this Superman the GOAT? Is it the GOAT interpretation of Superman?
Yeah, I would say
Without getting into details.
Yeah, I would say he's as close to GOAT as you can get now with Superman. I mean, I always say he's the best live action Superman. So it's always between me or like the animated version, which has like 10 years of material. Then you have this Superman. We also interviewed George Newbern, so we know how it is, with the voice of Superman. But I would say, objectively, as a critic, I think Zack Snyder's Superman is better. Just writing, character design, costume design, score, like actor. So if you have everything set and you have Superman, then it works because he's very believable. And same thing with Amy Adams. I think Amy by far is the best Lois. I think that's no question. She's better than all the other Loises. I like the other Lois too, but I think this one is particularly 3-dimensional. But Superman,
it's a different level. It's a different level.
Yeah, it's a different level. Same thing. I mean, actually, Alfred's the harder thing. Which Alfred's the best, is a little harder. But I think Jeremy Irons did a great job with Alfred in this one. In particular, actually, I liked him more in this one than BVS, and he was great in BVS too. So I think he had a lot to do with it's like Alfred again, like here he is. But again, so the spoiler talk. But last question for the whole group. Let's give our score to the movie. Let's do our rankings of the movie in the Snyder trilogy, but I think we should save that for the spoiler talk. So instead, let's give our rankings. Or no, 1 to 5. So I'll go last. So Umar, you can go first.
I got a 5. I think that the most underrated part of this might actually be the score, and the score is freaking amazing.
We didn't talk about the score yet. That's the crazy thing. We didn't talk about the score.
Yeah, there's a lot to like get into in the spoiler talk. I think it's gonna be long, so kind of strap in. But I just think it's the perfect. Oh yeah, man! Like especially and he said this was out in the public, but the new themes that he introduced, man. Yeah. I think it's again.
I think the new Wonder Woman theme will get a lot of people very happy, like with what he did with the character. I mean, it feels so mythic. Like, that's what you want.
I'll tell you why I'm gonna give this movie a 5, and also why, after watching it a second time soon, this might be the GOAT, and I'll tell you why. Because it's 5 stars for everything. The pacing is amazing. The score is amazing. Everything is amazing. Like I can't really think of like too many things that I can like harp on. And also I think that because it's the balance between all the different universes, like just technically what Zack Snyder did, it might easily be the GOAT, but I got a special respect for Batman Superman, so we'll see.
Zion, what about you? Where do you stand on this, on the score? Score and the score of the movie and the score what you give the movie. Both scores.
Yeah, I mean the score. Obviously, we can talk about the different scores in the specific scenes, but it's a very mythical aspect to the score, which obviously elevated the film to another level, like we said, to give it that grand nature. But as for my score of the film itself, I agree with Umar. It's 5 out of 5 because if there's even any one or two small things like, oh, maybe if they tweak this a little bit or not, like Samir mentioned, CGI was weak in certain points, but that's excusable because of the pandemic, because of how things are. You give him that little leeway. And so those you don't even consider, those are non-factors. In a 4-hour film, this is a 5 out of 5 movie because there's almost zero issues with the film. I can't think of one thing where I can say, oh, this is big enough where I just want to cut this out or change that completely. There's not a single thing I can think of. So this movie is just on every level, it just hit the criteria or higher and just set the bar to another level.
I think setting the bar is going to end up being the theme. I think when we talk about this movie, because I think it does set the bar in terms of scope and it sets the bar in terms of character dynamics. I think it does a lot of good things that we'll see how people feel about it. And in my opinion, people feel good about it, but I think it's going to go really well. But Samir, continue the trek that we're on right now. What would you give this movie out of 5?
I have to give it a 4, maybe 4.5, just because of the CGI and the color grading. I think even though there was a pandemic, it doesn't make the CGI any better or the color grading any better. So I think I'd have to take some points off for that.
But other than that, 4.5 or 4, if you hammer down one, let's give
like an 8.5 out of 10.
I was saying go out of 5 though.
All right,
What's 8.5?
4.25.
4.25. All right, Samir's going on his own metric system, you know. But all right, so for me, I'm gonna go with the 5, and for all the reasons everybody mentioned. I'm gonna end this by the way I started this when I said this is DC's Lord of the Rings, and I mean that in many ways, and in one of the ways is quality. And in terms of again script, I'll give it 5 out of 5, and we'll talk about spoiler why, because there's some parts of the script that is not just one of the best Zack Snyder scenes of DC scenes. It's up there, you know, and one of the best like cinema movie like moments for me. So script fire, score fire, acting performances for the most part, especially with Ray Fisher, absolutely fire. Directing fire. So like costume design fire. So it's like and I do see that VFX could have gone a little down, but again, because I go back to Zion, this first of all 3-year-old movie, then they got the deal in very late and right like literally months before release, and they're crunching to finish VFX for the entire movie. So of course there'll be some parts, especially stuff they added late, like the additional sequences, additional shoots, which will look a little unperfect, I would say, in which we're used to with Man of Steel and BVS, which is almost perfect CGI top to bottom, right? So for this, you're gonna feel like, okay, maybe this is a little not as great as it could have been. But again, I wouldn't put it because who's making movies during a pandemic? This is the first one we've seen where someone's actively making a movie in a pandemic and releasing it. So we'll see, like, what's another movie coming out? Will Spider-Man Far From Home, where they're doing the VFX at home, also have some issues with it, you know? And that's how you're going to be able to kind of judge how it's going to be. But for me, given all the good stuff, it's a 5 out of 5 movie. And we'll in spoiler talk, first I got to sit on it more, but we'll think about where it ranks between Man of Steel, BVS, and Justice League, because right now we're talking what? 3 hours, 4 hours. That's 10 hours, right? Of Zack Snyder's universe. Did I do the math right? Yeah, so that's 10 hours of Zack Snyder's universe. And I think any fan of the director, number one, but if you're a fan of these DC characters, there's a lot to love. But we hope you guys enjoy the movie when it comes out in a couple of days. And if you do like it, come back and leave your thoughts. Let us know what you think about it. From myself, from Zion, from Umar, and from Samir, we're the Faruqi brothers. We'll see you next time. Peace out.